Well, good morning, podcast world. This is Angie Hughes. I am with Producers XL, and we are rounding out the month of May. Can you believe it? We are almost into the summer months of 2025. And this month, I'm pretty excited. I'd like to tell you that I knew exactly what I was doing, and the fact that last month we couldn't do my Hey Meet Rick webinar with him. And so it got pushed into May for this podcast, but this couldn't be more timely, the this month's podcast. And so this is kind of going to be a May Medicare month, if you will. And we are going to talk all things Medicare because I tell you, it's been kind of crazy. So first, I want to recognize my guest on the podcast this month as Rick Roberts. He's with Producers XL, and he's our Medicare marketing manager, and so he is all things Medicare. He's immersed very deeply in this Medicare space. And I'm going to let him tell you a little bit about, what he does to keep his finger on the pulse with the conferences and the universities and the webinars and all the things that he's doing. And we'll end it with kind of teasing you a little bit about a summer campaign that we've got. So Rick, I want to thank you very much for joining me this month of May, rounding it out, talking all things Medicare.
Oh, absolutely. Good morning to everyone.
This is fun. Rick, I think you and I kind of inside of our agency, we just kind of do our own things, right? And every now and again, our paths will cross, and we'll talk. But I tell you what, I think you and I have had a lot of conversations in 2025 around Medicare. There's just been a lot going on. So I want to first jump backwards and go into, last AEP. How do you feel that went? Tell the audience, what in the world is she even talking about when she says AEP, and kind of give a little recap, and then we'll talk about what we're seeing going
Uh,
forward.
no, that sounds good. So what AEP is, I'm going to start with there is, the annual enrollment period for people that have Medicare Advantage or prescription drug plans. That's a period of time where they can switch their MA plans or their prescription drug plans. It runs October 15th through December 7th, and it's a crazy time of the year. And going back to last year, we had a lot of information, a lot of changes in terms of the Medicare market, in terms of prescription drug plans, how they were designed, and premiums and different things like that, and commissions was an issue. So you had the Inflation Reduction Act that came out, and that made a lot of changes to the prescription drug plans. And that not only affects the prescription drug plans in terms of the individual drug plans, the standalone drug plans, but also the ones that are built into the Medicare Advantage plans. So yeah, we spent a lot, the first part of, well, I would say the first part of last year, working with agents, educating them on, what the changes were. And throughout the summer, we had a lot of agents really be proactive in, educating their clients, because we really emphasize the importance to educate their clients on, what are the major changes to the prescription drug plans. And they had to, get up to date on what was going on and stuff. But we had agents, putting on meetings, educational meetings with their clients, started in the summer. So when it came AEP time, I could tell you that it went pretty darn smooth. There was some hiccups here and there kind of thing, but the agents overall did a wonderful job in educating their clients on the major changes for 2025. And I mean, I can't complain. The agents, they stayed really busy. I mean, they had to touch a lot more of their clients than what they normally do. A lot more in depth working with their clients, working on solutions. One of the major changes was dealing with the medications and what's on formularies. And sometimes, formularies do change. What drug may be covered, this year and maybe not next year. And that was a large part of it this year is, making sure, you got it, the clients into the most appropriate plan for them based upon those medications. So it was a little more hands-on this year, but
Mhm.
the agents handled it really well.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I think you and I can look back to when we kind of really jumped back into this whole prescription drug Medicare Advantage, and we had to go through all the certifications. And there's still a lot of confusion around that. We work with a lot of property and casualty agents, and they are like, "Hey, I think I'm going to get into this Medicare arena." it's a it's a great industry. I mean, never ending prospects, right? But it's just because annual enrollment runs October to December, you're actually prepping long before that. Like you had said, I mean, you were watching the Inflation Reduction Act and how it was moving and how it was going to be impactful. And then it's not just a matter of, okay, great, I'm certified. Let's go out there. I can talk about drug plans. I can talk about MA plans because that doesn't have anything to do with Medicare supplements, although everybody just thinks it's open enrollment season for all things Medicare, which that's okay. I mean, there are a lot of reviews that get done at that time, and we do still see a lot of activity in that Medicare supplement space at that time as well. But you have to know more than just I'm going to punch in a zip code, put my client's age in there, and then let's just see who comes up the most competitive, right? There's a whole lot more behind the scenes so that you can truly be a well-rounded Medicare consultant. And Rick, I know you really do preach a lot about that, to where you can't just be a one-trick pony. You really have to understand the space and understand what's going to be impactful to your Medicare beneficiaries so that you can give them real good transparency around, what they're going to be impacted by.
Oh yeah, I challenge every agent that wants to get into Medicare to be that true Medicare advisor. You can't just focus on one thing, either Medicare supplements, Medicare Advantage, or prescription drug plans. You got to understand all three of those and
Mhm.
understand your market, understand your client. Medicare Advantage plans don't work well in every area. Some of the areas they do work really well, but as an agent, being that Medicare advisor, you have to be able to have that conversation with the client and explain to them, what a Medicare Advantage plan is, how does a Medicare supplement plan works, and how does a prescription drug plan works, because you got to understand it all. Then you also got to understand, what does Medicare cover, what doesn't it cover?
Yeah.
That gives you an opportunity to get into some cross-selling opportunities. I always tell agents, I'm not the guy that's going to train you to twist their arm to, sign them up for every single thing that you can possibly sign them up for, but they got to understand what kind of gaps they have in
Mhm.
coverage, dental, vision, hearing, things like that. So yeah, to be that true Medicare advisor, it's not just understanding Medicare, but also the different products
Mhm.
that are associated with Medicare.
Yeah, and there's so many things that are impactful to beneficiaries that you're right. You don't, I don't think it's prudent to sit down and because Rick, you and I sell to family and friends, right? So we know
Hmm.
this. You can't sit down with a beneficiary and say, okay, we're going to talk about your Medicare solutions, whether it's an MA or it's a med sup. Does it include a prescription drug plan? And then we're going to move from there. And not to mention, right, there's rules, definitely rules you have to follow
Hmm.
in what you say when you're dealing with a Medicare Advantage and a prescription drug plan. Um, with the highest integrity, right? Everybody should follow the rules as well, and we certainly promote that. We do a lot of due diligence around compliance, because ultimately, right, that all flows up through our agency as the reporting
Hmm.
entity for that. But it's really hard to roll into, the Medicare solutions. And then let's talk about, dental vision hearing. Then let's talk about cancer, heart, stroke. Then let's talk about short-term care. Then let's talk about long-term care. And maybe we need to talk about a hospital indemnity plan. And I mean, it is a lot. But just like you said, Rick, I think what's really important is not only what does Medicare cover, but even more importantly, what does it not cover? Because you have got to, like we say in our agency, we've got to kind of look at the good, the bad, the ugly of product designs and insurance solutions. You, as an agent selling to a beneficiary, kind of need to understand all of that as well, so that you're making and helping your beneficiary make really good, solid decisions, and to basically run out there and go, oh yeah, I'm going to offer dental vision, and I've got, five different companies. You almost have to narrow it down and kind of bring it more into, one or two, or when you're talking about that cross selling, because if you think it's overwhelming, for the beneficiary, think about you now having to know five or six different plans inside of each one of those little cross sell opportunities. It's a lot.
Yeah, agents will find out which plans work best in their area. And it comes down to, it's like, like I said, it's you're not going to sit down with an appointment and you're going to get them a Medicare supplement, and you're not going to have a 2-hour appointment. And it's one of
Mhm.
those things you're going to look, and cover, Medicare. All right, here's a Medicare supplement. We'll look at a prescription drug plan. And then I always, you know, educate agents and, all right, the next step is, all right, when you deliver that policy, now you can have other conversations. Gives you a reason to revisit with those clients
Mhm.
about the other risks that they have, either, dental vision, critical
Mhm.
illness or something in those,
Yeah,
terms.
so
So
it sounds like what you're saying is Medicare is not a set it and forget it proposition, huh?
no, no, it's not. No, sell it, forget it. No, definitely
Yeah,
not. No,
you're you're
especially,
you're definitely touching it every single year.
well, especially with the changes we have seen with CMS and new
Hmm.
regulations the last few years. I mean, there's no way to just sell it and forget it. Nope. You got to work with your clients and you really got to show that, you are that person that they can go to. Because if it's confusing for agents, I mean, think about the Medicare beneficiary, how confusing
Yeah,
it is for them. And with
yeah.
the with the turbulence that we're seeing in the markets right now, it's more important for them to have that Medicare advisor to go to.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree. I completely agree with that. So I'm going to kind of blend a couple of questions together because I think they go hand in hand. I was going to ask you, so now that we've kind of taken a look back with some major changes and we start looking forward to, I mean, believe it or not, we're already, I mean, Rick, I know you're already prepping for 2026.
Don't remind me.
That's gonna But how do you keep your finger on the hub of what's going on in that space and stay abreast of all these changes and what do you see coming down the horizon with, in the short term for even just next year?
Well, like you brought up at the beginning, going to the Medicare conferences does a lot, visiting with the
Mhm.
different carrier reps, the individuals that they bring up to speak to you, dealing with compliance, regulatory things is very important to us here at Producers Excel to make sure to, we educate and train our agents to be as compliant as possible. When it comes to Medicare, because there are a lot of agents out there that don't do as very well doing
Mhm.
that. So, yeah,
Mhm.
going to conferences, always recommend, when you're contracted with Medicare carriers, and like on the MA side and the prescription drug side, and even the med sub, but in terms of compliance, because now you're going to about this time of year, you'll start seeing, it's time to recertify for AHIP and getting
Mhm.
ready for the prescription drug plans and Medicare Advantage plan trainings and stuff like that. But the carriers produce a lot of great information, and they have webinars that they put on that are really beneficial to
Mhm.
keep you abreast on some of the latest. But then I get emails. I sign up for emails from Medicare.gov, from CMS, from Social Security Administration. So I get tons and tons of emails of different topics coming in on a daily basis that I go through and I read through, and then I read the ones that that are really interesting to me that are going to probably impact our agents in the future. So you got to have those resources.
Yep, couldn't agree more. I know you and I are already talking about the Medicare conference next year that we're going to be attending just to kind of see how everything plays out. And we're constantly seeing, I just read something this morning about looking for transparency in that prescription drug space. And we know that's, behind the scenes, that's really what is driving a lot of attention and activity inside of that space. So it'll be interesting to see how all of that lands. Rick, if you had to stop and think about some of the tools and resources that you think are imperative for an agent, because I know a lot of times you and I are always talking about efficiency is the name of the game, but how does an agent get themselves to a point where they're efficient and they can handle hundreds, if not up to 1,000 individual clients through that 54 days of bliss that we call AEP.
Well, that's not what I call it, but in
Yeah,
terms
me
of tech,
neither.
in terms of technology, the word technology,
Yeah.
agents have to utilize the technology that they have at their fingertips when it comes to Medicare. And that's one of the things, you got to team yourself up with an FMO. And I'm proud to say that Producers Excel is one of those FMOs that we have the technology that agent can utilize to help them easily go through AEP and make things a lot better. I mean, a CRM, our system that we brought on a few years ago was just to quote prescription drug plans and Medicare Advantage plans. That has turned into a whole CMR system with pearls, your personal URLs that you can send out directly to your clients where they can update their information on their end, where you don't have to type stuff in like that. There's just a lot, I mean, and the carriers also, I mean, electronic applications, during, I hate to say it, but like during COVID, that helped us transition a lot of our focus from the good old days of paper applications to electronic applications,
Yeah.
and utilizing that technology that every single carrier has, those e-applications that can be utilized. And it's, the electronic scope of appointments. You don't have to worry about a paper scope of appointments, dealing with Medicare Advantage and prescription drug plan appointments. You have to have the SOA, 48-hour rule. And now
Mhm.
you can do that electronically. So there's so many things that you can do, with the technology. And I always hear from agents, well, we're dealing with people, 65 years or older. They just don't do technology. I tell you what, that is changing.
It is definitely.
As we age,
Yep.
the younger generation's getting older, and I tell you what, more tech savvy,
Oh, for sure.
and you got the seniors. I mean, if they have a smartphone, they have an email address, and it's one of those things are you going to have 100% of your clients utilizing, the digital resources, the technology, the pearls, the things like that? No. But if you can get, 3 or 4 out of 10 of your clients to do that,
Hmm.
that's going to make you more efficient down the road.
Yep, for
So,
sure.
and I think
Yeah,
it's a little bit of an educational process for your clients too,
I
is,
would agree. I mean, Rick, you can speak to that. I mean, we used to do all pay. I mean, we used to have boxes and boxes and boxes of paper where basically at the end of AEP, I can distinctively, all of us in the office were doing data entry, trying to get these paper apps in and out the door. And I mean, you've got huge, I mean, transition over to electronic application, which is right? It goes straight to the carrier. It's always in good order because they don't let you move past it. So I
Mhm.
think you're right, Rick. It's a transition, and for some it could be painful, but for others it'll be a no-brainer. They won't struggle with it at all.
No, no, I don't think so.
Um, Tell me a little bit about open enrollment, maybe define for our audience kind of, there's a difference between guaranteed issue and open enrollment. And then, because of, having to be Plan G and aging in and getting eligible, Plan F's no longer kind of walk through that and what you are seeing from the carriers in the fact that, hey, they have to take Plan G, but do they really want Plan G?
Yeah, so open enrollment is a period of time around when somebody turns age 65. So they have that 7-month window, 3 months before the month of and 3 months after, where they can actually enroll into Medicare. And then at that time, they can enroll into a Medicare supplement. I'm going to use Medicare supplement as an example. When they sign up for Medicare Part A and B, they're going to have an effective date. And so the biggest thing to remember is that Part B effective date. They get a 6-month window to enroll into a Medicare supplement plan within what they consider open enrollment, which means there's no underwriting, there's no health questions. I hate to use the word guaranteed issue because that's a whole unique other situation, but it's open enrollment is no health questions.
Mhm.
And then, individuals that are guaranteed issue is just a scenario. I'll give you an example of somebody, maybe they are continuing to work at an employer past 65, and maybe they're going to retire at age 67, and they already have Part A and B. And then when they come off that group insurance, well, open enrollment opportunity may not be available, but they have a guaranteed issue situation within 63 days of coming off that group insurance when they have A and B, and it's been longer than 6 months since they've had the start of Part B, then they're a guaranteed issue. And then that brings into another scenario where, did they get Medicare prior or after January 1 of 2020? If they had Medicare prior to January 1 of 2020, then their guaranteed issue option is actually a Plan F. If it was after that date, their guaranteed issue option is Plan G. So that's why, when it comes to Medicare supplement, you always hear a lot about Plan F and Plan G. But there are some other alternatives out there, like a Plan N and high deductible G, that I think agents really have to open their minds and think outside the box, especially this time. And I'm going to change the topic a little bit, but talking about rate increases that we're seeing in the market, and I think they really need to take a look at some of these alternative Medicare supplement plans.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I mean, yeah, I mean, we're still seeing a lot, and I don't know if the audience, if you've been in the Medicare world long enough, this is probably old hat. But if you've not necessarily been in it a while, it may feel kind of ugly right now, but it really shouldn't be viewed as that, right? We need insurance companies in this space that are tried and true. They can pay their claims. We don't need them exiting the market. Now, granted, Rick and I would don't want them to see them stop paying commissions, obviously, because we know you all out there selling to the beneficiaries should get paid for your services. Um, but we also have to, and what Rick is alluding to, is we need to leave ourselves open to, and Rick had a wonderful thought about that this morning. He says, let's say your client's healthy and you're asking them the lead-in questions, right, on the application, and they're answering no to everything. And you maybe want to look at not putting them in their open enrollment where there's no health questions, but maybe you want to go ahead and put them through underwriting and get them into a high G or a Plan N, um, for the fact that maybe the rates in that block are going to look a little bit better. And quite frankly, spreadsheeting Medicare solutions based on who comes up, and I hate to use the word cheapest, but who comes up least expensive is not always in the best interest of that client, because how many of you have seen that happen, and now you've got carriers in the space that said, guess what, guys, we priced our product so well that you guys sold so much of it, but most of that was open enrollment, which was no health questions, and now we don't want to do this anymore. So your client, if they're not healthy enough to move, they're going to stay in that block. Well, who stays in that block are those that can't move, and now all of a sudden they're going to take rate increases throughout their lifetime because they can't move to another one. So I think you're right, Rick. I think we're going to see agents exploring some other options, which we think is good, but we also think when you're doing that, you most certainly have got to look at a cross-sell opportunity. And I'll just come at it from protecting your book of business. So to all of the agents and advisors listening, I want to tell you that when you're selling a product that has a lower premium, and even though you may be making a couple of points more in commission, it's still lower premium. So it's going to take you 30% or more new business to bring your revenue back up. And so you've got to protect your book and your checkbook and your agency revenue by cross-selling some of those. So if that's a hospital indemnity with a high G, or it's a hospital indemnity with an N, or it's a dental vision, or it's a, cancer heart, or it's, those are just good things to pair together, because quite frankly, if you don't know the story of a hospital indemnity and you don't know the story of a cancer heart stroke, I mean, these things are true life. Rick, you talk about it. I mean, true lifesavers to
Mhm.
families when they get into that crisis, because that's exactly what that feels like to families. And it would be really nice that they would actually just get a lump sum of money to help them figure out how they're going to balance everything out while the family's going through this cancer diagnosis.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, this is a period of time that agents need to really become a partner with the carriers they work with.
Yeah.
The last few weeks is really showing us on the Medicare supplement side, there's some fluctuations going on. There's some uncertainty going on. There's been some carriers, cutting some commissions. There have been carriers that are actually pulling out of the market because they took on too much risk and just can't handle the financial
Mhm.
obligations to all the claims. And so now it's, there are carriers that are coming out with some strategic plans on how you can work with them to, make sure that, the book of business that they're building is a good book of business and not an unhealthy book of business. And again, I think it's one of those, you really got to look at your relationship with the carrier as you are a partner.
Hmm.
You're not just trying to throw everything at them and, they got to take all this risk, because ultimately you got to, you want to help your clients in the future by maybe, helping them, get with a carrier that's not taking on all that bad risk. And so
Hmm.
your future rate increases aren't going to be as high as it would be with another carrier that just takes every risk possible, you know? And so you
Yeah.
got to really have that partnership with those carriers, and work with them. And we've seen some emails come out here recently in the last few days. Some carriers, just not saying they can't take open enrollment business, but just trying to, pre-screen and work with them, and that kind
Mhm.
of thing. And again, working with those carriers, because you can always go out there and you can always sell the cheapest one. But I think with the period of time that we're in right now, and the number of carriers that there's a lot of younger carriers in this business that are feeling the pressure of doing rate increases or actually pulling out of the market. And so, I mean, I talked with Angie earlier. It's like, working with some of the larger companies that have been doing this for decades, like the Mutual of Omaha, the Aetna, the Cignas, even the Humanas, the ones that have been in this business, that you may want to, at least take a look towards that direction, because they can handle the financial fluctuations that
Mhm.
they're seeing in the market right now a little bit better than somebody that's been in the market for 2 years.
Right, right. Yeah, that's very true, Rick. Well, I know you and I could spend a long time talking about Medicare. There's always something going on in that space, and we're not short of prospects, right? I mean, there's over 10,000. As a matter of fact, I'm pretty sure that I saw numbers now that we're at 11,000 folks turning age 65 every single day in the
Oh,
United
and that trend's going to stay for
States.
decades. So
Yeah, certainly not short on prospects. Could certainly use more advisors that want to kind of be a well-rounded senior advisor, helping their clients navigate through that. Because if you think about, the even just the agents that are succession plans for other agents, whether it be their grandparents or their parents, and they're buying their book of business and they're taking over the family business, or they're getting into this space. Um, Getting into that Medicare arena industry is very viable. And I will tell you, I find it incredibly rewarding, because they just don't even know how to navigate through a lot of the Medicare waters. And so when you're able to help them successfully navigate through that and give them a better understanding than just what they've heard about at the coffee store, um, then it's very beneficial. So Rick, I'll leave you with the last word if there was anything else, but I do truly appreciate you taking the time to hop on um, the podcast this month with me. I think there's a lot. And I do want to say, if anybody wants to get a hold of Rick, you can reach him at 800-541-6705, or rick.roberts@producersxl.com. Um, Sometimes I think it's fun if I tell people to try to position questions to him that they're like, hey, have you ever had this happen? Because I feel like he's been doing this long enough that he's pretty well had everything handed to him, but you never know. You never know.
I've pretty much heard everything by now. So well tested, Well,
Absolutely.
yeah, my final thought is if you are a current Medicare agent, don't be worried like this is a doom and gloom situation in terms of rate increases, companies pulling out. This is an opportunity for agents uh, to work with their clients in terms of Medicare, because they definitely need somebody that can be that expert to guide them through these periods of time of higher rate increases, see what other options they got, and just how things have changed in Medicare the last few years, just to educate them on what's going on. So it's an opportunity for agents, is the way you got to look at it.
Yep. Couldn't agree more. Thank you so much, Rick. Thank you for all joining us, and feel free to subscribe and join me next month. I haven't figured out who I'm going to have on, but I'm sure it'll be another wonderful podcast. And we thank you all for your time. Thanks, Rick.
Thank you.